Hello, me again, Phil Croshaw here, and welcome to Passions. And in this episode, we're delighted to be welcoming Laura Frey to the show, talking about horses and broadcasting. Interesting mix. Enjoy. Hello and a very warm welcome to this episode of Passions. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Laura Pittson. Laura Pittson /Frey. And Laura will actually explain why she's got Laura Pittson and Frey in her name as part of this interview. So a very warm welcome to Passions, Laura. Tell us who you are and what your passions are.
Well, as you said, I'm Laura Pittson, and that's, I suppose, my broadcasting name. I did actually manage to get married about 10 years ago, but and Frey is my married name, but I don't actually think I've worked much in Frey. So it's funny when you say passion, because I've been very lucky in my life. My passions have crisscrossed as my work, which I know is got to be the best thing. You know, find something that you enjoy doing for work, and then isn't work anymore, which has always been my motto. But my passions really are theatre, dancing predominantly, and then radio, and they have dominated my life.
So the good thing about this then is that as a previous presenter of radio, you actually are still a presenter of radio. This shouldn't be too much of a stretch, this interview today, albeit you're probably usually the one doing the interviewing.
Yeah, that's why it's so nice. I can sit here and relax and lean back and let you do all the peddling, which is lovely.
Yeah, but you do realise the extra pressure it creates, the fact that you're a professional presenter. Anyway, right. So, so take us back then. Talk about your career, how it evolved. I always find it very interesting, actually, how people say that they were, and a lot have done this through these episodes, about how they were lucky. I would argue that what actually happens is people make choices and take actions and decisions that allow them to crisscross those passions into earning a living, arguably, albeit everybody says they were lucky. So talk me through it. How did it all start? I'm assuming you didn't come out as a baby, two hours old with headphones on. How did it develop?
Well, I suppose, my mum was a professional dancer. Funnily enough, she worked at the Palladium. Her and her four sisters. Mum was one of five girls. So I think right from the beginning, dancing was a massive thing in my life, and singing as well. And I went to Italia Conti Performing Arts School and did my 3 years there. And back then you had to get an equity card. The whole thing was about equity, and you had to do these ridiculous jobs, and you had to do 40 weeks with these ridiculous jobs so that you could then audition for London Theatre or television. You couldn't do actually much professional work without an equity card. So I did my professional training, and I actually qualified. Back in those days, they used to get you to qualify to teach ballet modern and tap there, which I'm so grateful for. I've used it so many times when I've been out of work. And I left there and I went off to Italy to get my equity card. That was just had to get the equity card. Came back and the government changed the law and you didn't need the equity card anymore, which actually made life a lot harder because all the auditions were full of people. So that's another story. So I pretty much danced and sang and performed for about 14 years. Just doing that.
Wow.
And I did always like talking, though, it has to be said, even in those days. What changed everything, actually, was I went to Paris to work there, to do Can-Can. and I got a job. All the girls in the show were working on another show called Club Dorothée, which was a kind of, it was a TV show, sort of like Crackerjack for us, that kind of style, a teenagers show. And they used to have like pop bands come on, and we all had to be like the girls in the background clapping and dancing. You had to learn a dance routine everywhere. It's dead easy. We loved it. And I once got asked to come and announce something, you know, because I think they thought it might be a bit fun because we had English accents and things. And that was it, really. I thought, my God, I like this much. I sort of was hoping they'd let me off learning the dance routine. I could just announce the next thing. I was like, this is much more my scene. So when I came back to the UK, I started thinking, what a great idea that would be.
So let me just ask you about the dance, because that's really quite, that's a long time to be. Where did the passion for dancing come from? Was it your mum, or was there something you used to see on TV? Can you explain? Because I ask this to everybody. Where did it come from? Why dance and singing and, I don't know, not magic acts or whatever?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously having a parent guiding you is always helpful. You know, I teach now and there's no doubt about it. But of course it can go against the grain as well. And my sister certainly didn't want to be a professional. She was out of there. So it doesn't always work like that. I think I had an amazing teacher who I still am friends with now, and I absolutely adore her. I just think I liked the routine of it, and I think I liked performing. Yeah, you never had to ask me twice to go to dancing. I'm not going to lie, I found it hard when I went to Italia Conti, because suddenly you're not the best in the local school anymore, and that's a massive shock. And yeah, I started to find it harder when I went there, but still I pursued it and I carried on.
I suspect that's quite common, isn't it, actually, where you are that, you know, even I suppose intellectual children who are by a country mile ahead in their school, but then they maybe go to grammar school, or they go, or even if they're in college, and then they go to Cambridge University.
Yeah, it's a big shock.
It's all of a sudden they're not king of the castle anymore or queen of the castle anymore, are they?
Yeah, and some people, and I'm sure you know this from coaching yourself, some people push harder when they're in the bottom of the class. Some people lose heart. And so you have to work out what kind of person you are. Are you better off at being top dog and trying to stay there? Are you better at being like the guy behind the top person and pushing harder all the time? And it's all about pacing yourself. I mean, God, it's just such a horrible lesson to have to learn at 16, isn't it? Oh my God, I'm not the best. So yeah, I did find that hard, and I definitely knew then I was never going to be the best dancer in the world. I was okay, but I was not going to be the best. So maybe even at that early stage, I thought one day I will do something else. But with dancing, you have this inner urgency because you know you can't do it forever. I guess it's something like football. You know that really your time's up at 25. So,
and I guess you must have had to work really hard. Is that fair to say that to even to remain at that reasonable level, the work ethic was key? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a killer. I mean, obviously. At those kind of school, at Italia Conti, we're doing all three. So you had your singing and your tap, your bits in the middle, not as strenuous as like the Royal Ballet School or something like that. But yeah, there's a lot to keep up. It is hard. Actually, what's hard is in between jobs. You get this job, you'd be super fit, you'd work every night, you'd come home and have 3 months off, and you'd be like a jelly on a plate. It's just dreadful. And that's when you realize it's unsustainable, long term. How can you just can't. Your body doesn't want you to either, but you don't worry about that when you're young. You just crack on and you have fun and do it.
And how did you come to the conclusion then that you didn't feel you were good enough to be at the absolute top? Was it just comparing yourself with other dancers, or what helped you to come to that self-awareness, I guess, that you didn't think you were likely to be, you know, in the top 1% in the world or whatever your ambitions were?
I think you just look around you, and I'm secretly a bit lazy.
Well, it's not a secret anymore because you've just told me on here.
And I'm like a bit of a chat, and actually, you know, there's some dancers that I work with. I mean, God, probably some of them, they are known, and they'll go into an audition and they'll fight for the job. Great. They'll get into the show, and if the choreography changes the choreography, they remember it. You know, I'm a bit too busy chatting to somebody at the after show party, and then, you know, the next morning's all a bit of a struggle. But I got through, and I wasn't rubbish. I got the job, so I must have been okay. But I preferred, it was such a lovely shift when I got into radio, because you realise that it's almost better not to rehearse. And it was rehearsals that I absolutely hated in dancing. I hated that. I couldn't wait to get in the show, and I'm great at smiling every night. That's not a problem. You know, I can keep the energy going. It's just I hated rehearsals. I really did.
I've just got this vision in my mind of when I was at school. It was always Philip would do a lot better at school in the class if he stopped showing off to his friend and talking. And I've just got this vision of you getting the same feedback. Laura would be a lot better dancer if she stopped talking all the time to everybody.
I did like chatting. I do remember one teacher saying to me, Laura, dancers don't talk; they talk with their bodies. And it's true. Wow. You actually don't have to open your mouth if you're a dancer. But, you know, yeah, I think I realised pretty early on that wasn't my absolute forte. But again, it was the easiest way to get an equity card back then as well. So it was an absolute must. You had to have it. Now, not so much.
Yeah, no, I can understand that totally. So, okay, so you came back to the UK. You kind of realised that dance wasn't quite doing it for you anymore. My words, not necessarily yours. And you decided that you wanted to do something new and different. So, tell me how that journey then developed from there.
So coming back from France, what did I do? I thought, you know, quite innocently, I'll just write to some radio stations, because there wasn't much internet then, you know. So you had to someone gave me a great big book, and it had every radio station in it. I don't even know what it was called, and I wrote to them all, and nothing. Oh dear, that's all a bit difficult. And so I thought, okay. What I did was, now how did I do this? I think I met someone at a dinner or something, and he said he owned a radio station, and I said, well, can I just come and make tea? And of course he said no. I mean, now I've worked in radio, you know how many people say that. But I actually really, really persisted, and then I offered, you know, just to do some typing, and in the end he just gave in. I think he just got sick of me. And I worked overnights there just making the tea. That was called Country Music Radio. At the same time, I was working at London's Cockney Tavern, which was a lovely show, actually. It was, you know, all the old English songs, Lambeth Walk and all that. And it had Carl Wayne. I don't know if you remember him from The Move. He was the lead guy in it.
Yeah.
And I was working there at night, so I worked in the radio. When I finished the show at the Cockney, I used to walk up Tottenham Court Road and go and do the radio overnights, answering the phone down in Holborn. And I did that for a while, you know, unpaid, by the way, probably 2 years, I think. Obviously, the dance show was paid.
Do you know, I just want to, sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to pick up on that actually, because I think there's a takeaway there, particularly for maybe younger people, and that's the persistence test. You know, you said about you wrote but you were persistent. And most people that I come across who've achieved, they usually have a level of persistence that they don't just get knocked away and then call it a day and take it personally. They have the persistence to keep going, and that sounds like that's exactly what you did at that point.
I think, it's weird. When I started working at that place, which was called CMR, Country Music Radio, it's a satellite station. I don't know why, but I just decided this was where I was going. I don't know what drove me. And I used to go there. It was overnight, so there's hardly anyone there. It was quite dark and dingy. The coffee was rubbish. I just sat there and listened to somebody else doing a show and answered the phones. And it was, why did I do that? I don't know, because actually, meanwhile, down the road, I had a really nice job where I was doing all sparkly, lovely stuff. And everyone else was going out for drinks after work, and I don't know what made me just shit. And I don't know what made me so sure that would get me somewhere. Determination. I don't know.
Yeah, well, passion, determination, the fact you were learning. Another thing you find very often with achievement is sacrifice. And of course, sacrifice comes in all sorts of different ways, whether that's financially or whether that's in time. So many people will say they don't have time, and then you ask them how much time they spend watching Emmerdale every week, and then they suddenly have this realization, actually they do have the time, they're just not using it in the way that they need to use it in order to move forward with what they're trying to do. So obviously
I do remember being really tired, because overnight it is hard
yeah
work.
absolutely.
And because I wasn't there every night, there were all sorts of different situations, and things change all the time when you're just a helper. You're not part of it. I'm still very grateful, don't get me wrong, but I just helped out as and when. And there's an amazing guy called Eric Wiltshire who had a show called Media Zoo, and he used to get me on. Media Zoo is about technology. And because I'm so damn rubbish at technology, he would give me something to see if I could work it. 9 times out of 10, I'd either break it or not be able to use it. And he was, I have so much to thank him for. I think the show was once a month with him. So, and I met him from making the tea, and he let me on to that. And yeah, that went on for ages, just again, unpaid. And when people say unpaid, as you know, that's okay. However, if you have to go to London and pay your parking and be there at someone else's time convenience, this is when it comes to sacrifice. That's the sacrifice. It's not the doing, it's the when, how, and what time. And that's when you have to let other things down, or tell fibs where you really work to go and do something for free where you don't work, and things like that. So that they were the challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so obviously, I think it's fair to say that you're doing your apprenticeship in the middle of the night, unpaid. It ended up working out for you. So tell us how that happened.
2 things. I was still busily sending out tapes and all sorts of things. Tapes, by the way, that were terrible, because you had to persuade someone to do it for you. And of course, I tell this to my students a lot. Everyone you're near, the last thing they want is another presenter. Why would they sit there and help you? Because you're now competition.
You might be better than them.
Yeah. So I think young people find this quite hard, because they're used to teachers who encourage them, and in those days, don't forget, you couldn't do a recording at home, you couldn't do a broadcast at home, you couldn't do anything. So you'd have to say to someone, "Oh, would you mind helping me do a demo?" And they're like, "Not really. Why would I do that?" So, but there was one day I was at work helping, answering phones, and there was a man there that said to me, his name's Chris England, I'll never forget. He said, "Have you not thought about reading travel?" Because I said, I'm never going to get out of here. I'm never going to get any further. If people don't answer my emails, not emails, letters, and here I am. And he said, well, think differently. Why don't you try traffic and travel? I'd not even thought of it. I didn't even know. And again, in those days, you you looked in the radio magazine, and if there was an advert, you applied for the job. It was a bit like that. So I said, well, there's no jobs advertised. And he said, whoever waited for a job advert? He said, go and knock on the door. So I went there. Funnily enough, they were in Tottenham Road, amazingly, where I was working down the road in, skirts and tap shoes. And I went in with my padded envelope and a tape. In those days it was tape, and just said I'd really like to do traffic and travel, and I got a call in about 2 weeks. I couldn't believe it. It was then that the guy Chris England said, oh, turnover of staff there is so rapid, it's really hard work. I thought, great, I might have known, but I was delighted, and I loved that job, really loved it. Was amazing. So traffic and travel is really where it was my first paid broadcasting job.
Absolutely awesome.
It was really hard. You had to be there at 4 a.m, and you did split shifts. So you had to do, you went on air at 5:30, but you had to be there at 4 or 4:30, I can't remember, depending on what station you're working on. You had your headphones. It was a room surrounded by people, and they were all broadcasting to different stations. And you got 3, 4, and if you were really good, 5 stations. And you had a switchboard again. Think about my technical ability. I was really challenged. And you had to go live to the aeroplane, because they had the aeroplane reports coming down. You had a desk in front of you with ex-police officers all shouting, and there's no internet, don't forget, all shouting the information. So you would constantly be going, M1, oh my God, 8 to 9, crash. Meanwhile, someone on this line would be saying, we're coming to you in 2, 1, go. It's the most exciting job ever. And I loved it.
So at that point, you were hooked, in essence, were you?
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. And what happened was, depending on, again, what show you got, more and more of my presenters, I got given 3 stations, they started bringing me in on the show. And I got into a bit of trouble for being so long on the show that I didn't make my next travel break. And yeah, I got smacked on the wrist a few times about that. But one of those stations offered me a job on breakfast.
So by that time, you were actually being paid. I'm assuming you were being paid. You were actually being paid for talking.
Yeah!
You did it right. You did it right.
But I was still doing the dancing show in Tottenham Road as well.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I was absolutely shattered. Because the first, you had to do 6 a.m. till 9. That was the actual, but it deviated. But between 6 and 9 is breakfast. Then you had to come back for drive time, 4 till 7. I finished that, and then I walked down to the Cockney Tavern on stage for 8. So I'd be doing drive time travel broadcasts, doing my makeup, putting on the eyelashes on and doing all that. I'd run and I'd quickly get changed. I'd be on stage for 8 at the Cockney Tavern. Yeah. Do
you ever look back? Because when I look back to when I was younger, I'd be driving a lot with my job and my career. And sometimes I would be flying backward and forward from Ireland and all sorts of things. And I look back now in my more senior years and I think, how the hell did I do that? Do you ever think that or not?
I just felt so lucky. I just really wanted to do it. Yeah, there are other things that I have felt like that, but those 2 jobs, to do the 2 things I absolutely love, almost in the same road. It was Tottenham Road. So, Traffic Link was in the Tool Centrepoint building, and the Cockney Tavern was at the other end by all the stereo shops. It was just great. Yeah. I felt tired. I did feel tired, but I loved it.
So you did all that apprenticeship, you did all that effort in, you put all that work in, and then fast forward, you ended up on a show with a guy that not many people would know. Why don't you tell us about that?
So what do you mean, the show?
Yes.
So after when I got picked from there, I went up to Peterborough to work with this guy called Kevin Lawrence, who was very, very difficult actually, but a brilliant broadcaster. I worked with him for 3 years, and that's a very long story in itself. But he taught me everything I knew. And after that, I got a call, and this is what I love about radio. You don't have to go to an interview or an audition because they've heard you already. So they just, it's like traffic. They just call you and say, do you want the job? It's lovely.
Yeah, they know already that you're good enough.
Yeah, they know what you sound like. So after, when I was at Hereward, actually, I got a call from Classic Gold saying, are you interested? And actually, that was a big wrench for me because I loved Peterborough. I had by then bought a flat and I was really happy. And Classic Gold was a smaller station in terms of it was a local one. And I was thinking, oh, is this a good idea? But I'm on my own because it was very hard for women to be on their own then. They always put women on with men. And I kind of had to prove I could do it. So I trundled down to Classic Gold. Within about 2 months, they gave me the Lunchtime Network show, which was wonderful because it was obviously national. So I'd gone from local to national, which I was like, okay, now we're talking. And I really hoped things were going well. And then I got called into the office and said, we're taking you off lunchtime. So my heart, I was like, oh, what have I done? And they said, we're putting you on breakfast with someone famous, but we're not going to tell you who. And
wow, that must have been an amazing.
Yeah,
you must be pinching yourself at this point.
Well, I was thinking, who? And I said no, because I was having worked up in Peterborough back in the day when women didn't ever have a say. It was always they used to call them chick on a stick because you sat there, you didn't even have your own microphone, you were on the other side, so every time you had the killer line they faded you down. I mean, it was not fair. It was a bit rubbish in a way, but and I was
Can I just ask you, what years, just as a complete and utter off-piste, what years were you in Peterborough? Remember?
So yeah, it was 97 or 98 to 2000 and 2001.
Yeah.
Around
I lived there then.
Oh my God, probably saw me on the back of a bus.
It's absolutely very possible. But anyway, that's a completely different conversation for another time. But I just thought I'd mention that. Yeah, so carry on anyway. So so you somebody famous, but you didn't know who.
Yeah, so I mean, and that went on for about. So I said no, I will not do another breakfast show with a man totally controlling the situation. And I have to at this point go back to Peter and say Kevin and I did great shows. We won lots of awards. I was really proud, but I realised when push comes to shove, when you're in one of those partnerships, they tend to hold the man. So maybe now not the same, but back then there were no female survivors. Put it that way.
Yeah. Wow.
And I realised if I'm ever going to get ahead, I've got to go on my own in order to hold my ground. So whilst I was very flattered about a famous person, of course they're going to be more powerful. If they're male, they're going to choose them over me. It doesn't matter how good I am. And so I realised it was a bloody big risk. So then I came in and said, no, I'll stick with Lunchtimes. And they said, sorry, you take it or you go. So I was like, oh, all right, then who is it? So, and then they told me it was Tony Blackburn. And actually I was really chuffed. Yeah, I was very pleased because my mother, don't laugh, had worked with him. And she knew that he was lovely. And he had just literally walked out of the jungle. He'd just won it.
Crikey, so his profile must have been huge.
Yeah, his profile was very huge. He'd come from Gold. He was on London Capital Gold, and Classic Gold, where I was, had got him, and signed up. So it was a good time, and he was very buoyant. He was, and he was great. And also, just from the setup of the desk, we were both on the same side, whereas previously I was always on the other side. So you could never ever touch your mic. And sometimes you've got something really funny to say, and you're not on. It's just so annoying. So Tony very much let me just lean over and flick it on if I want. He was a completely different broadcaster, actually, to be fair. But I had never worked with a girl, funnily enough. It was new to him as well. And we didn't know how it was going to go. But 3.5 years later, we still were together. So we did well.
So that is fantastic. I mean, I think that if that's not inspiring to people in a similar situation, and I know the world's changed slightly since then, those days, but if that's not inspirational to somebody who's, starting out, and making the tea, as it were, and the fact you ended up there working with possibly one of the best known broadcasters in the UK, I would argue.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think that persistence and that work ethic, and obviously you must have had a natural personality, and you clearly do have a natural personality for it. It must have been wonderful to think that you might not have thought it at the time, but all that hard work and persistence and graft, if you like, and struggle turned into something that you were actually. Did you ever think, by the way, as a slight aside again, I do this a lot. This is why I'm not a professional interviewer. You ever think to yourself, actually, how did I get here?
Oh, I thought this is where I was going. This is what I meant when I actually, I did. I felt so lucky. I think I just feel really, really lucky. I never went through what people, you often see like movie stars say, oh, it's horrible up here. I never felt like that. I felt tired. It's tiring because you're up early all the time. And perhaps on the outside, you might think, well, I'll just take a holiday if I need one. It never works like that. Because in commercial radio, you are totally all about your sponsors. And if the sponsors, and this often happened actually, you'd just be thinking, oh, I might sneakily book a holiday in perhaps in a month's time. And then the sales girls, I mean, let's face it, the sales guys work their absolute backsides off. They come in and go, oh, we've just sold this cruise for your show. And you think, oh God, there goes my holiday. Because you couldn't let them down because they needed it to be both of you broadcasting. So there were very few times I took a holiday when I wanted to, but I'm not complaining. That is how it goes. So the tiring thing can be an issue because, of course, they expect you to go out in the evening in order to talk about it the next day. The sponsors want to take you to the Ivy for lunch. You got to go into a West End show to see that. You got to go and see Paul McCartney up in Birmingham, NEC. And I can guarantee you they're always happening the same week. We broadcasted from Lapland 3 years running, 10 days. We broadcasted live from Australia 2 weeks, Hong Kong 2 weeks, cruise ships many times. So yeah,
amazing.
Really
absolutely amazing. I can see why there must have been times where you thought you'd hit the jackpot. Being passionate about what you were doing and world travel all thrown in, and working with Tony as well, you must have thought you'd hit the jackpot at that point.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you go through your little insecure moments, you think, because, I think we had 3 different bosses while I was there. And, I knew one really digged me and thought I was great. Another one, not so much. And you fight for survival. Of course, you go on holiday, someone fills in for you. If they're better than you, then you could get the chippity chop. But Tony was very loyal. We did get on great. I do remember one time when he was away, when I was away, and he came back and he said, "Oh, thank God you're back." And I said, "What happened?" He kept saying it. You know, he said, "That girl they put me with, she kept eating pasties with onions, and the whole studio stank." It really made me laugh. So yeah, he we liked being together, which did help. You know, we had a good giggle. And we liked each other's way of working, this kind of not too much preparation thing, which I think I've been in a partnership 4 times in radio, and everyone's different. Some really like to prepare everything. There's not a right way or a wrong way, but you both have to be happy with whichever way you're going with. And Tony, if he ever prepared, beware, because he would change it. If he thought of something funnier as he was going along, he would just change it. But I was fine with that. But some people would not be fine with that. Yeah.
Brilliant. So obviously, to what degree do you think radio has changed? Do you have a view on how much radio has changed? I mean, obviously, we all know that the internet has taken over the planet pretty much. It's obviously changed a lot. Yeah, media, I suppose, in general, has changed a lot in the last few years. Yeah,
I think radio has changed. When I first started out, some people gave me a bit of a hard time because they felt, especially some of the old guys, you know, they felt I didn't know the records, which was true. You know, they were from the 60s. I was already quite a lot younger than them, and I hadn't been crazy for records. In fact, I'd never bought a record in my life. I was a tape girl. And it used to be a badge of honor to know, oh, that one was the second release in 1966 or whatever. And when I got on the chair, I was like, why does anyone need to know that? And as time went on, it all went on the internet anyway, and it became less and less relevant. And now, if you listen to the radio, it's very rare that presenters even talk about music. They don't say that was released in April 1944. No one cares.
Yeah.
In fact, I think you'd probably be told off by your boss now if you started rambling on about information like that. So that's one of the big things that changed, and I did get a hard time about that. Some of those grumpy presenters gave me it, and some people said to me, you know, you shouldn't be doing that job. And I used to say, I know, but the job I should be doing, someone else has got it.
Yeah, but you know what? Surely to goodness, it's about entertainment. I mean, you know, it's become about entertainment. I mean, yeah. I work with a lot of companies in content marketing now, which is something that wouldn't have nobody even heard of it 10 years ago. And now it's about, and I say to my clients, you need to be thinking and behaving like a media company. Yeah. And you can imagine if you're producing rivets up in somewhere in the depths of Lancashire, you think I'm totally nuts.
Yeah. It's just not in their remit. Exactly.
And as we were saying earlier about personal branding now being so important, and what strikes me is that at the heart of it, entertainment is critical, whether you're a business trying to promote a product or whether you're in radio. And what strikes me is you were probably very entertaining because of your personality.
I think you know, there was a big sea change happening. It was, we got to get some women on radio. And every radio station I worked in, actually, I had worked in a couple of overnight places as well, again, unpaid, on my journey. And I was the only woman in the whole radio station on air. And certainly at Classic Gold, when I went there was only one other woman there on air. And you were dealing with a lot of, you know, male energy, and in their defense, that's the way it had been. It was always about the music and the knowledge and how clever I am, and I know where that record lives, and I'm going to go and get that record and put it back. And they all knew all that stuff, and that was what was wanted then, and it was changing. I think it was quite hard for them to have those changes. So that the whole record information thing has gone. And the other thing that has changed massively is there are more women on the radio. They just
about to ask you that now. So would you say it's has it reached a point now where it is equal, or is there still a bit of a way to go, in your opinion?
I'm frightened of the word equal. I hate that word. I like good performers. I like a lot of male performers, and I dislike quite a few female performers, not as people, but they're not my taste in their performing. I think what women probably needed was a chance. Because how do you know if someone's any good if you won't actually let them on a microphone? I have to say, when one job I went for years ago, I still know this man and I do tease him about it. But I came all the way down to London to interview for this job. And he said, I said to him, but the job I really want is the breakfast show. And I said, I'd like to lead it. So have a guy, but me be the lead. And he said, as long as I live, you and I will never see that, Laura. And I was like, how can you even say that? And he said, and another thing he said was, people like male voices on the radio. And I said, that's just nonsense. The first voice every male hears is a woman's voice. How can they not like a woman's voice? It's just depends, you know. And again, so a lot has changed.
Almost urban myths in a way, probably.
Yeah, but I don't like just having a woman on the radio because she's a woman. I want them to be good. I want to feel I want to be with them. And that's just a gut feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100% true. So I suppose looking at the modern day and today, the interesting thing, I suppose, in a way, is that YouTube came along. And obviously, as a part of that, video exploded, amateur video exploded. And audio then became a bit of a secondary thing. This is just my observation. But what seems to have happened in the last 2 or 3 years particularly is that, number one, that was we were talking before we came on air, that the number one the word podcast suddenly started to appear from pretty much from nowhere. And possibly on the basis of the fact that everybody's so busy, you can listen to a podcast while you're doing other things like driving and such like. So podcasting has exploded, possibly because of that, but also, of course, because you can produce your own podcast, even using your own phone, even. And of course, what it means is you can have very niche shows. You can have, I don't know, shows about blue glasses, if that's your kind of passion, that's your thing. So what's your thoughts then on the podcast explosion? Do you think that people should overcome the fears and have a go? And do you think businesses should be doing more in the way of podcasts or video podcasts? Or what's your view on it?
I think, so from where you started about, we went video. And I even remember when they first put cameras in Classic Gold, and Tony and I were horrified because we were like, oh, and I feel less intimate actually when there's a screen. I think there's something wonderful about talking and not seeing. And I don't know if it's because radio is my thing, but I personally like listening without seeing. I don't watch breakfast TV. I still listen to the radio. In the car, I prefer, even if I'm not driving, obviously, I prefer actually just listening. Podcasting, I have always felt right from the very beginning it was the way forward. What was always going to hold podcasting back was accessibility. You're talking to people like me who are hopeless with technology, people like my mum. Sorry, Mum, you're great at other things, but you can't work your damn phone. I think as soon as we found that easier, and of course the next step, I know how to do it now, but it took me ages, and my mum still definitely isn't there, getting what's on the phone onto your car. On the older cars, it's not so obvious. I think that's what holds back podcasting. But watch this space. I test drove an electric car the other day, and the equipment in there was picking up my phone and before I even did anything. And if that's the way it's going to be, and you can drive along and tell your podcast, like an Alexa, show me a podcast about radio presenting, and it looks for it for you.
We're very close.
We are. And
We're very close.
is where I'm at. That's where
Brilliant.
I come in and I drop everything else.
Brilliant. Love it. Okay, then. So finally, you have another passion, don't you, in your life now, which is nothing to do with technology. Tell us about your passion for horses that's come over the last few years.
Well, I suppose animals in general. As a child, I always loved animals. And I did ride horses as a youngster, but of course it was very much, if you were going to be a dancer and you know, the more serious the training is, the horse thing may be a problem. Because of course a horse isn't just the time that you're in the saddle, it's the caring. It's, you know, you think about looking after your pet rabbit and multiply it by about 40. But they were always in the back of my mind. And actually, my mum says the first show they ever took me to was a circus. And she remembers for about 6 months afterwards, I kept saying, "Can we go back to the circus?" And she said, "I knew then, God help us," you know. So horses, my husband and I built our house. Tony and I lost our job because we got bought out. That Global bought Classic Gold, and neither of us were needed, which was, we were gutted actually. We were, but it gave me time to do something different. So my husband and I built our house, and when we did, you know, we had a paddock, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to rescue a horse." Famous last words.
Yeah, like you do.
Yeah, like you do. I also rescued a dog, and we now have 4 horses and 4 dogs, and really no more space. Otherwise, I tell you, there'd be more. I mean, especially now with COVID, people can't afford to keep their pets, and it's heartbreaking. And unfortunately, the minute they knock on the door, I do listen to the sob stories. But yeah, I love horses. As you get older, it's not just about, you know, trying to get over a jump or something. You start loving the being and the learning, and yeah, they remind you there's no guarantees in life. You're so unpredictable in one way, and yet what's predictable about our lives right now? Nothing.
Well, exactly. I mean, we're recording this in December, very close to Christmas, actually, December 2020, and it's been an unbelievable year. And a really sad statistic I heard the other day was that dog abandonment has gone up by 35%. Yeah. Because of people buying a dog because they were in lockdown and bored. The kids needed entertaining, and then all of a sudden, then all it comes to an end. Everybody has to go back to work. Everybody has to go back to school, and they've got this dog, which is really quite a sad thing. And it's something I'd not thought of until I heard that on the radio, actually.
And it is heartbreaking because, you know, I've got 4 rescue dogs here, and every day, actually, I thank that person who let them go because I've got them here. But, you know, sometimes in life, things go wrong. You haven't got the time, blah, blah, blah. And it's great to be that person who can catch the ball for somebody else. You know, I haven't got a problem with that. I just hope that people think more carefully. You know, we can't always be in control of circumstances, but perhaps we can try and look ahead of it. But yeah, horses and dogs, they got me through lockdown. You know, just caring for them. It's just such a lovely thing. So yeah, I feel very blessed.
Would you say you're a sort of person who bounces back quite quickly from a difficult situation? Like obviously when you lost the position with Tony on the show, did you bounce back reasonably quickly, or did you find it very difficult to deal with that? What in effect is almost like a perceived rejection sometimes?
That was hard because there were lots of things involved. I mean, salary, you know, you lose your money, and it's not like another job where you can just ring around, you know, tell me a national breakfast show that's looking for someone right now. It just kind of doesn't happen. In fact, at the time, Terry Wogan had been in the breakfast show for about 25, 30 years. I was like, he's never going to hand that to us, you know, because that was always our dream goal. Radio 2, you know, still there, still the goal. Yeah. So you've got that to worry about. You are heartbroken, of course. I mean, it's a big knock to not have that job. I suppose I counted my blessings that no one replaced me. That would have hurt more. And in fact, I did have a situation, fun enough. There was a weird situation where Tony had to do 3 more months than me before they closed it down. And I had to go because I got BBC Oxford. And that hurt, actually, even knowing there was someone coming to replace me, even though I knew they were closing down anyway. That was hard. Yeah. And no job since has been as fab, which is a shame.
You reminded me of something now, which is completely off piste again. But I heard William Shatner, from Star Trek, and I heard him being interviewed, and he said that when he found out that they were making the Star Trek The Next Generation, which was Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard, he was devastated because he said, "That's my bridge." That's my Star Trek bridge. Nobody should be on my Star Trek bridge. And
it is amazing, isn't it?
Isn't it?
It is. And actually, we went to a wedding. It's probably about 3 years after the Global had taken over. And Paul Burnett, myself, Tony Blackburn, and Graham Rogers, who was also on Plastic Gold, were all on the table. And my husband said, God, it was like being on a radio show. He said it actually was, the energy was everyone, the one-liners. My husband said it just needed a record in between. I was exhausted. And it's so funny how you just wind us all up and off it goes again. But yeah, I did find it very difficult, but I'm a big girl. I actually rang up the Imperial Society of Teachers of Dancing, who I'd qualified with way back at college when they used to make us do that, which at the time I resented. I was blooming glad of it. And I just re-registered, and I think I got a phone call 2 weeks later, and I was teaching for somebody. Was it what I wanted to be doing? No, I wanted to be doing radio. However, I love teaching, and I was glad to be working. I appreciated it, and just got on with it. As I say, I did do BBC Oxford for a while. I did Mercury for a while. There were stations, but for whatever reason they didn't work. It's hard to go from national to local, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Listen, I understand what you're saying. I know you kind of feel comfortable saying it, but it's like playing in the Premiership at soccer, football, and then suddenly having to go and play in the 4th division. Anything like that, where you've performed at the top of that particular arena, and then you have to kind of go down the league, as it were. It's always going to be a challenge.
It's not just about the fact that you're up your jumper, which I'm sure I was. Of course you're going to be like a bit full of yourself, probably. It's also the fact that the people around you can find it annoying, or you're crushing their toes because they'd hoped. Once again, it's that, and this is all the big lessons in life: learning to work with people. Not everyone wants you there. Not everyone's got their open arms going, "Oh, hurrah, you've come from a breakfast show with Tony Blackburn." They're probably thinking, "Bloomin' heck, why has she turned up?" And it's learning how to deal with that. I remember my first morning. This is so terrible. They gave me the keys, and when I worked at Mercury, had to be in at 5 or whatever. It was snowing, and their building is on an industrial site, and the lights had broken, and I couldn't open the padlock. And I couldn't get in. And I thought, oh my God, I'm just not used to being on my own. Because at Classic Gold, you had the news team, you had the, loads of people. And then suddenly it was just me on my own with a key in the middle of nowhere, freezing, And that's, again, it's all things like that as adjusting. No one to bounce off.
Yeah, I remember in my career, my corporate career, I was always in big companies, working with, lots of staff working for me and such like. And then I got an offer that I couldn't refuse, as they say, in a small business. The money was a lot better and the opportunity was better. It wasn't as big or political. And I remember thinking the same thing, sat in an office with 3 other people. And I remember very clearly thinking, oh my God, what have I done? You know, but you adapt.
Yeah. I found it very hard. Yeah. Just miss the laughs, off air. That's the best radio comes when everyone's getting on off air.
Sure.
That's what winds everyone up,
Sure.
But I learned and I did my best. And I'm sure I was probably a pain for them as well sometimes, but we all cracked on. And actually they got bought by heart. So again, then they networked with the London show. So again, that one fell out. Radio's changed a lot, actually.
Fantastic. And at that point, I think we'll come to a close. Laura, thank you ever so much for joining me today. Absolute joy to talk to you. And I can now confirm formally you are a talker. But it's just as well, because you wouldn't be much good on a show like this if you weren't a talker, would you? So thanks ever so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you being so candid and open with your story. And hopefully I'll be seeing you, maybe meet you at some point in the real world once we see we can actually see what's going on in the world.
Well, let's hope so. And you have a lovely, lovely Christmas and look forward to meeting you soon.
And thank you, Laura, and you. Take care. Bye-bye.